Welcome to In Good Company. My name is Bill Joel, and we have the pleasure of having Mike Bailey with us, who is the 2024 recipient of the ACM SIGGRAPH Distinguished Educator Award. Now, Mike is a professor of computer science at Oregon State University. He specializes in scientific visualization, 3D interactive computer graphics, stereographics, and parallel programming. Welcome, Mike, to In Good Company.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. We've been doing this for several years now, having the award recipients talk about lots of stuff. For instance, and I'm going to ask you the question, how did you get into computer graphics, teaching computer graphics in the first place?
I would love to tell you that this was all very strategic, that I planned it and I was really smart about it, but I would be lying if I said that. My senior year in college, and I was an engineering major,
Mhm.
I needed a tech elective. I needed to burn off some tech elective credits. And there was this computer graphics class that was at the right time. It didn't interfere with things I had to take. And by then I knew I wanted to do like anything computer. So I took it and I fell in love. And really, one of my reactions at first was I was kind of pissed off. Like, you spend 3 years in engineering school learning how to manipulate numbers. Finally, in the fourth year, they show you how to draw them, how to relate what
Mm.
they really mean.
Yeah.
And but really, I just fell in love with the whole thing. Um, that talked me into grad school. That talked me into staying for the master's. And at the end of the master's, you realize more what you don't know than what you do know. And that talked me into staying for a PhD. And by then, I was so in love with computer graphics, I took the first opportunity I had to get a professor job
Mhm.
because I wanted to share it. And really,
Mhm.
computer graphics is so cool. It's not like you're teaching at somebody. It's more like you're sharing. Remember in kindergarten, the show and tell, oh, look, a
Oh, yeah.
shiny rock. Uh, it's more like that. And that's really what I enjoy about teaching computer graphics is it really is more like sharing than it is like teaching.
Yeah. I was noticing in your list of the areas that you've taught in, you've worked in, et cetera, but I don't see animation in the list. Have you dealt with animation, or are you more of a computer graphics purist? I don't mean that in a nasty sense.
Uh, Sort of, I mean, I guess maybe more broad and shallower computer graphics person is I'm
Oh, you're
sort of
not shallow.
interested.
You're not
Well,
shallow.
but it's not deep. Like for instance, your animation experience is quite deep, and
Hmm.
mine is not. Although I do animation, and some of my students do animation type projects.
Hmm.
But really, I'm just sort of interested in like all things computer graphics
Hmm.
that far down. And what's really fun about that is you find yourself making connections. Oh, we can be visualizing that, but we can use an animation, and we
Hmm.
need to write a great shader in order to do it. So sort of at that level, it's kind of fun making the connections across the spectrum.
Well, instead of calling it shallow, let's say you're a generalist.
Okay, generalist sounds
That's a
yeah,
better. That's a better.
that's a
That's a
good
better.
euphemism.
Well, yeah. Um, so so you started talking about how you work with students in computer graphics. So I mean, I looked at your website and you had quite a few publications. So tell me something about the research that you're doing, and how it ties in with the classes you teach, the students you work with,
Oh,
how you work with students in research, both graduate and undergraduate.
okay. Well, let me go back to the classes I teach. I teach 3 classes a year, and and my colleagues go, "What? You're only teaching 3 classes a year?" Well, total that's around 1,500 students. Um, in the fall term, I teach Intro to Computer Graphics, which this coming term, which starts 3 weeks from yesterday, um, is going to be somewhere around 500 students, about half on campus, about half online.
Oh,
In the
I
winter term, I teach computer graphics shaders, which will be about 250. That's my small class. And in the spring, I teach parallel programming, which includes GPU. And last year, that was about 780. Again, about half on campus, half online. And the reason it gets that way is one, they're popular topics. But two, I don't put an enrollment cap on my classes, which makes me kind of unique, weird, strange outlier in the department because I've always had this mantra of computer graphics is for everyone. Originally when I started teaching, the department would say, "Oh no, you have to be a major in order to take it." And eventually, occasionally somebody from another major would sneak in. And even though they weren't as good at programming as the computer science students, they were spectacular at finding something to do with computer graphics. And so I started kind of jiggering the content of the course to make it so that you didn't have to be a major to take it. And it's really sort of where I'm going now with all of this is to see how broad I can push it into other majors, other departments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things that you and I take for granted that the graphics world knows how to do
Mm-hmm.
are spectacular, revolutionary techniques in other fields. Just waiting for somebody to walk over from one of these classes and go, "Hey, did you know we can be doing this with our data?" And so that's sort of how that got there. The research that I do with students, and I have grad students and I have undergrads too. I have honors college students doing thesis projects, have a lot to do with their own interests.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of funny. In the intro class last year, Andrew Glasner came in and gave a Zoom talk. I
Ooh,
know, isn't that cool? Um,
I got to meet him this last year, being on the unified jury for
mm,
SIGGRAPH. We were actually in the same room. He is a card. He is a wonderful speaker.
He is a brilliant genius. There's about three people I've known in my life that I really truly would describe as geniuses, and he is one of them. But he agreed to give a talk. He works for Weta now,
Mm-hmm.
and he described some of the things they were doing, like they would do a water simulation, but the director would say, "Well, no, I want more splash over here and less splash over there." Like water is water, come on. Um, but they would do that. And so he referred to it as directable water. Well, my students picked up on this. And so one of them now is doing something she calls directable cloth, sort of
Mm.
the same idea as I want a little more stretch here, a little less stretch there. How do you set that up? And that's kind of cool. Um, I have another one who is interested in sort of why do leaves look like they do? The shape, the veins, the color, the reflectivity. And so he really is, I would refer to it as directable leaves. That's not what he calls it. But again, it was Andrew who sort of threw that word out there, directable, and I had students just jump all over that. My students also do a lot of things with GPU computing. I got interested in shaders when they first came out, which was around 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that sort of backed me into GPU programming. And
Mm.
of course, if you deal with data, you want to do massive things on your data as fast as you possibly can. And of course, all those cool internal cores come in very, very handy for
Oh
that.
yeah.
So I do have some students doing um, some combination of data analysis and visualization on very, very large data sets. And the area we're doing it in, I think is just really fun, is smart cities. Smart cities,
Mm.
cities are setting up sensors all over,
Mm-hmm.
temperature, wind direction, pollution this, pollution that. And they don't know what to do with the data. Like you really want to use that data to help run your city. But I've got this PhD student that's just doing a wonderful job with just a massive amount of data, um, but is applying GPU computing and machine learning to it,
Mm.
really looking for patterns. And so what he wants to do with the city he's working with is to let them be able to predict, like, oh, the weather conditions are coming up like this. And oh, we've seen that pattern before.
Mm.
And that means you're going to have a carbon monoxide problem. Do something.
Mm.
So anyway, I get sucked into sort of all areas within this spectrum.
Well, that makes life interesting when you have so many different things you try to explore. I mean,
That's what I think.
you sound like me. I would say, "Oh, that, gee, That sounds like a neat thing to explore. That sounds interesting. I wonder if, and the minute you hear
That,
that word if, it just takes off.
that's exactly how it works. You know, it's
Ah,
sort of like the Pixar movie Up, Squirrel.
yeah. By the way, you were talking about the size of your classes, and I find it hard to relate because the school I retired from a couple of years ago, we had a max of 40 per class, or if it was in a lab, 30.
Hmm, okay.
Sorry, 25, because we only had so many computers in the lab. So I and
Really, in this day,
even my undergrad, which was a fairly large university, our classes maxed out at about 200. So when
well,
you
in
talk
this
about
day and
500,
age, the computer lab's not an issue because all the students have
true.
pretty good graphics computers, not for my class, but for the games they want to play.
It's funny you're saying that
Um,
because in the lab when I teach computer graphics, it's amazing. They all walk in with their laptops and they don't touch the computers in the lab. They use their laptops.
Makes perfect sense. They
Yeah,
probably have better graphics cards than you have in the
uh,
lab.
probably do.
Mhm.
Now I got one more question for you before we. I think people would be interested. Where do you think computer graphic education is going? And I'm not going to ask you to think about 20 years, 30 years in the future. Let's just talk about the next, 3 to 5 years. And of course, the one question everybody has been talking about, especially at the conference this year, is how will generative AI change how we teach computer graphics and all the related disciplines?
Oh, okay. Let me go away and think about that for a month. Um, yeah, clearly at SIGGRAPH this year, generative AI this, generative AI that. Um, a year ago, I was thinking about this very same thing. And in the intro to graphics class, the final project is a final project. They get to pick it. I have to approve it, but they get to pick it.
Hmm.
And rather than try and fight generative AI, I decided to embrace it and see what happened. And so I told them flat out, you can use generative AI as long as one, you tell me that you did it, and two,
Hmm.
you give me your prompts. And I wanted to
Hmm.
see, you have a group of 400 some students. There's going to be a real mix of what people decide to do with it. And most of the students who tried it didn't really amount to much. It was much younger a year ago, but there were a handful that did amazing things. Like one student used a whole bunch of different generative AI prompts. He wanted to create a jungle scene. So he's got the machine learning out there getting models of toucan birds and palm trees and things like that. And he's putting the scene together. He's animating the scene, and this is all with OpenGL,
Hmm.
so it's programmable stuff. He's doing the lighting and again all the things you would do with an OpenGL program, but he's using generative AI for the grunt things like go find me an OBJ file I can use over here. And I thought this is just perfect. So I'm trying to think now as the new quarter is breathing down my neck. How do I build on that? Is keep the creativity, keep the creation that's going on in the student's brain alive and enhance it and figure out where the grunt level is in putting this kind of thing together. Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. From my point of view, where I would like to take computer graphics education is again following that mantra computer graphics is for everyone and keep trying to push it into other disciplines.
Hmm.
By God, we have such problems in every discipline. Every discipline is trying to do so much with so little, trying to help this, avoid that. We
Hmm.
need help. And I think computer graphics is in a good position to lend that help.
Well, it does. I mean, because it taps into humans' natural ability to uh, recognize things by hearing it, by seeing it, by smelling it. Our senses. And
Yep.
I'm stepping away from reading texts, reading equations or whatever, but using the senses we had since birth, you
Yep,
know?
exactly. And so anything I can do through computer graphics education to help people get to that,
Hmm.
that's what I want to do with my future of computer graphics education. That's why I like doing this intro course, this whirlwind course at SIGGRAPH so much, is it's a room full of 400 people who have the potential to go out and do amazing things if only we can help them ease into the topic. Now, that's
Ah,
where I like to come in.
well, Mike, thank you very, very much for talking with me this evening and for talking with all the viewers who watch our videos. And I wish you luck moving your courses in the direction you're trying to move them. And that's how they say, keep doing the good work.
Well, this is what I enjoy doing. So yes, if I do it another 50 years, I'll probably finally get it right. But yes, I will keep working at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.